Hi there, and welcome to the Grief and Rebirth podcast. I'm your host, author and trauma survivor Irene Weinberg, here to encourage you wherever you are in your healing journey. In each episode, I chat with incredible grief and trauma specialists, healers, mediums, and celebs, as well as remarkable people who have inspiring healing stories to share. If you're looking for a podcast that's both uplifting and inspiring, you've found it. Let us help you find your joy in life. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds each of you so very well. I'm speaking to you from my studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and I could not be more delighted to have the pleasure of interviewing Seta Araz Shahinian, a gifted healer and channel who writes very special, customized prayers that can help a person overcome any set of limitations he or she is experiencing. When Seta empowers her clients with tools and resources that help them develop a personal relationship with God, they become able to actively participate in their own healing journey. Seta began her professional career as a graduate of NYU's Stern Business School, and she quickly developed an interest and keen ability to study and apply various kinesiology-based techniques, alternative care modalities, homeopathy, Psych-K, past life regression, and more. She also has her own healing techniques and methods that have been channeled to her by Source, namely 2 hands to heal and the diligent application of deliberate intent. She shares these 2 powerful self-healing modalities with her clients in order to provide them with the specific tools and resources they need to address ailments that afflict and burden the mind, body, and soul. Other modalities that have been channeled to Seta by Source include freedom from codependency, as well as the multifaceted 7 steps to abundance, which is often used to address and resolve obstacles that can prohibit a person from receiving and enjoying the bounty of God's divine abundance. Seta's passion and goal, which is to heal the mind, body, and soul, to educate and prevent dis-ease mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually, and to end needless suffering, is highly in sync with the mission of Grief and Rebirth podcast, which is to enlighten, educate, and provide healing resources that can transform lives. And full disclosure, I have personally been healing with Seta with her loving, gifted help for years, and in many ways, Grief and Rebirth podcast is a result of the tremendous healing I have done over time with Seta. In fact, the name of this podcast, Grief and Rebirth, was channeled to me by Seta during one of our healing sessions. What an amazing blessing, and I am so very grateful. I'm looking forward to talking with Seta, who will be speaking to us today from Wyckoff, New Jersey, about what transpires spiritually during a funeral. Who hears us when we pray? Why is it important to pray for a soul that has deceased? The burdens a soul carries forward from past lives? What is multiple soul syndrome? What is an enhanced superlative timeline? Seta's 7 steps to abundance, and more, for what is surely going to be an incredibly enlightening and insights-filled interview with a truly remarkable healer. Hi, Seta.
Hi,
Warm, heartfelt welcome to Grief and Rebirth podcast.
Thank you so much. You don't know how much it thrills me to see you with this podcast, reaching thousands and thousands of people every week, all over the globe, internationally. And I really want to also say congratulations to you.
Thank you.
For your wonderful, wonderful award.
Thank you.
Irene has received first place in 2 categories in the International 2024 Speak Up Radio Positive Change Award. It's just absolutely, you are worthy of this award.
Thank you.
I've worked for years to spread your word, your message of loving kindness that we all know, and your experiences and how much you've learned from it. And, every soul has an obligation to learn and then to share their gift. And you are certainly sharing your gift. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you, Seta. And I would not be sitting here talking with you if I hadn't done all that healing work with you, which is why I have such a passion to introduce people to mediums and healers and trauma specialists and all, because I've been there and it made a huge difference, huge in my life. And I want it to help other people too. So thank you for that.
I really believe it's the shortcut, that we need to heal. And I can't even imagine how much people sort of suffer needlessly when they don't have access to these resources.
Yeah.
So thank you for spreading the word.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for helping me, for giving me the fuel and the healing to allow me to do this. So let's talk about you and what you can do, because I'm living proof of a lot of that. So let's start from the beginning so that people get to know you. What inspires you to leave your grounded professional career? And I know you're such a bright lady. And what inspired you to leave that to become a healer?
Well, necessity is always the mother of invention. My children suffered very poorly after being vaccinated, and my eldest was placed on the autistic spectrum. He lost complete speech, complete verbal regression at around the age of 2, and that lasted for 2.5 years.
Wow, how distressing.
We're going back almost 30 years, so there was no internet then at the time. And I remember I had waited almost 11 months for an appointment to see the top physician who wrote textbooks on autism in Manhattan. And she looked at me, and at the time, my son was, almost 4. And she said to me that your son is never going to speak. And she said, if I were you, I would learn sign language. And I said to myself, I just don't believe that God would not provide us with a solution. I have to search. And that's what propelled me forward towards looking at homeopathy, at energy healing, alternative care, and everything that was outside of the typical physician's world. And you know what? Miracles abounded. And my son speaks beautifully, and thank God he drives. He's doing wonderfully.
He's functioning and he's fine.
Yes.
He's okay now.
Yes.
Isn't that marvelous? That's wonderful.
Yes.
And talk about a testament to healing.
Well, living in a world of silence, it was 4.5 by the time he started speaking. And it's devastating to not be able to communicate. So can you imagine? To me, where energy flows, health ensues. So it's about identifying all of the blockages that prevent energy from flowing fluidly. And when you're able to resolve those obstacles, those blockages, you can see that the body has its own natural ability to heal. And we just have to find the resources, and we have to know that, God has given us many, many tools. There are so many healers, and each has their own modality or technique to contribute. And each speaks their own language, and each has channeled their own gifts. So it's a community, and we have to access all of these multiple resources to heal.
And it's such a blessing to know that these resources are available to us. It's not a one size fits all or a one modality fits all, right? So that's exactly what I'm trying to bring forward on this podcast, is to bring forward all these wonderful modalities. Listen to the person, see what healing modality resonates with you. So I know your healing modality, you do many, many things, but you do a lot of healing through prayer.
I do.
So please explain to everybody, because people get brought up praying and being told to pray, but actually, who's hearing us? Why should we pray? Who hears us when we pray? And how do you perceive what you call God? Because there's also many different interpretations of that word. So could you explain that to us?
Yes. So I'm going to go back and just speak first about the fact that we are comprised of mind, body, and soul. And everybody knows that they have to take care of their bodies. They have to eat well, sleep well, perhaps exercise, bathe. And this is part of our daily activity. And of course, we also educate our minds. We go to school, and then eventually we learn a profession or a trade. And we go to work, and we use our minds to provide for ourselves and our families. And that leaves the soul. Many people actually don't pray, and they don't really understand that it's so important to nourish and nurture the soul. The soul is probably the most important aspect of the Trinity of mind, body, and soul, because when we perish, this incarnation is over and we pass on, the only thing that survives us is the soul. And the question remains, did you evolve or did you devolve? So how can we ensure that our soul is going to evolve? Yes, we can do good things and be good. But to be honest with you, we really need God in our lives, because prayer is part of a daily activity that if we cultivate, it creates ease in our lives, because we're not alone and we are receiving the support of the divine. When I pray, I literally see that it rains light on us, and it resembles a kaleidoscope of all different colors falling from different geometric shapes. I feel, that the divine, God, source, the universe, it's light. And this light, as it comes into us and we are in alignment with source, we receive what we require in order to heal, in order to move forward. And literally when we're praying, what I observe are blockages dissolving and disappearing. So imagine, for example, that you have persistently entertained a negative thought. And that negative thought, each time you think something, you are planting a seed in your future. And as time elapses, that seed will come to fruition. And if you think in the same negative fashion with repetition and intensity, you plant many negative seeds. And because they are one and the same, they will congeal, they will solidify. And when they spread everywhere throughout our essence and being, we will have truly cursed ourselves. Now, I know that sounds like a very dramatic word, but all I'm trying to say is that we will have coaxed into existence through our negativity a pattern, state, or condition that represents a significant obstacle.
Are you saying sort of like that if you're constantly being very negative and you're planting the seed all the time, every time you think you're sort of watering it?
Yes.
So that it grows more bigger and bigger, and it blocks out the sun from other parts of you in a way.
Yes. So imagine being so entrenched in that negativity, right? How can we now dissolve it? Do you know how difficult it is for that person to do it by themselves?
And they're not conscious of it. They're not always conscious of it.
No. And so we talk about complaining. There's some people really do love to complain and talk about their problems. And they do so to almost every listener that they can find. And what they're not understanding is that with every complaint, they're actually planting the seed to receive even more to complain about, right?
Oh my.
So we are ultimately responsible for the life that we create, because our thoughts dictate our reality, as well as our actions, our words. So I think one of the greatest gifts is to really develop an ability to be self-aware, to have control over our thoughts, and to indulge the positive. If we really understood the degree to which every negative thought will come to fruition, I think we would be shocked, to be honest with you.
I think it's shocking, because I am sure, and I've seen it myself, where very negative people, sometimes no one wishes for disease, no one wishes for illness, but if you're doing nothing but feeding your body in a way negativity, where's that going to go?
Right, because it creates blockages within us as well. And ultimately it's a push-pull, right? So people say, well, God isn't answering my prayers. So now the question I'm going to say is, are you praying correctly, or are you complaining to God? Because if you're actually complaining in your prayers, I'm going to say that's akin to self-harm. Because when we think something, it has a particular strength. When we speak it, it's a little bit stronger. When we write it, it's even stronger. But when we pray for something, and we pray with complaints, then I will tell you unequivocally that the law of attraction will be reflecting even more to complain about. And
so instead of saying, man, I need more money, or God, why aren't I making more money, or whatever, the better way to do that would be, thank you for the gift of bringing me abundance, or whatever. Is that the way? Is that the more proper way?
Yes. Or thank you for clearing the path towards abundance, right? So I haven't even said anything negative, but I know that there is a path towards abundance. Thank you for ensuring that I am open and receptive to receiving, right? Thank you for ensuring that I am in alignment with source, because this is a shower head. If you are not standing underneath that shower head, you're not going to receive. So you have to, there are some prerequisites. But the important thing is that God can facilitate all of these changes and transformations necessary for you to be in alignment, for you to be receptive to abundance. And it's really imperative, because once we've established these negative patterns, we actually create containers. We become embedded and entrenched and anchored into these containers that hold all these negative
It's an
patterns.
energetic container, in other words.
Yes,
It's
it's
like
an
we
energetic
get stuck.
container.
Uh-huh.
Yes. And we truly contaminate our structure and make it very difficult for us to move forward. So if you have a crystallized negative belief system, you have to pray in order to be able to release yourself from the chains and shackles of that belief system.
That's really the basis of healing.
Yeah. So how can we do that without God? I think it's impossible. I mean, I can even go to therapy and discuss it and have an awareness of what my issue is and really talk about the patterns that I have created in my life. But to undo a negative pattern, you would have to think in a positive manner with more frequency and intensity than you did initially when you were creating that negative pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard. So guess what? The shortcut is prayer. Because the minute we pray, light comes down and it dissolves those negative patterns, states, and conditions, and we experience freedom as a consequence.
But part of that healing is that you have to be aware of what your issues are. And some people are not quite, they know they're having problems in their lives, but they don't know if it came from a past life issue or something that they need to heal or what's going on,
Very
right?
true. Very, very true.
So that's and I want to ask you also, Seta, okay, you've got two people praying and they're praying for two directly opposite results. Who hears what and what gets
Right.
what gets answered?
It's the Super Bowl, right?
Right.
Half the stadium is on for
Right,
one side
right.
and half the other. Well, you know what? I love that question because there is an answer, and it's actually mathematical in nature. So not everyone's prayer does not have the same impact. Why? Because think of a megaphone. So what would allow me to raise the volume of my prayer so that it is heard more readily, more loudly, right, is amplified? Well, it's the degree, the frequency of love that you have within you. It's how much faith you have inside of you. How much have you prayed in the past? There is a path, right? Is it a well-worn path in your communication with God, in your relationship with God? Or is it very sparse and highly almost unnoticeable? It's how much gratitude do you have? How much are you able to surrender? How much peace do you have within you? And how much are you in service? So you can imagine that all of these variables and even more impact the frequency of the energy emanating from you. And of course, all spoken words or thoughts are energetic in nature. And so if I'm praying for my team and I have all those things going for me, but the other person is angry and complaining and is cursing out at the player for making a mistake, I'm sorry, but I think my prayer is going to win. I mean, it's just with all humility. Oh, that's the other one. How much humility do you have? So I mean, doesn't that make sense?
Yeah,
Right?
it makes sense. It makes sense. So you would say if your team wins, maybe they won on that last winning touchdown was on the wings of angels.
Yes.
The right message got through, right?
So of course you have hundreds of thousands of people praying for their team to win. And I guess it's the sum total of the frequency of one versus the other. And of course the player themselves, right?
And they're praying too, for sure.
And
For
worthiness.
sure.
And how worthy the person feels. So it's a complicated answer, but at the same time, it is cumulatively the sum total of all the energies emanating from you. And if those words are amplified, or if they're very diminished in volume because you have a diminished frequency.
Right. So Seta, I know that we're touching on it, but for everyone listening to this, aside from the fact that they have blockages, they want to accomplish things, they need to heal and all that, is there an overarching reason that people should heal their souls, to be aware, to go out of their way to get to heal, to do this in this lifetime as much as they can? Is there a really great reason?
Yes. First of all, I believe that the only reason we incarnate is to evolve. And it is the soul's evolution that I am referencing. And it's the soul's ability to fulfill its life's purpose and its soul's mission, which is always to learn lessons, to master a gift, and to share that gift with others, which is, for example, what you are doing with your show or what I do in my healing practice. Now, what happens should we devolve? I have to say that I do believe in reincarnation. I have seen many things and experienced many things myself. So I would say that my belief in reincarnation is at 100%. And this is very important. Let's say in this lifetime, I felt powerless about something and I felt guilty. If my powerlessness and guilt is on the level of a curse, right? Because I indulged that negativity to such a degree that I have now placed a chain and shackle, and I have sort of mummified my soul with the frequencies of that curse that correspond to my, let's say, my guilt and powerlessness, for example, and I die. Well, because my soul ascends, my soul will carry that information. And in my next incarnation, as a contractual limitation, it will carry it forward. And it will be located within a time capsule. And the time capsule will be located somewhere throughout the physical body, creating an energetic.
It's an energetic time capsule.
Yes, it's an energetic time capsule. And it will, for example, guilt oftentimes impacts the thyroid. So what are the emotions that impact the thyroid? Emotional instability, expectations, indecisiveness, guilt, etc. Complaining, for example. So let's say I have all of these curses, and each curse has its own individual time capsule, because it didn't just go away. It didn't disappear after I died.
So it followed you onto the other side, and it's sitting with your soul. So when you incarnate, it's coming back with you because it's a part of your soul until you heal it.
And it's a mandate. I have to experience it. I'm obligated. I cannot escape that contract. So what happens now is that eventually, because it takes up space, it creates blockages. Even pathology can develop because of that. I can become, develop a particular disease that has an affinity for the organ that is carrying the time capsule or carrying the limitation. And if I've had it for 20 lifetimes, I will actually be able to detect in that time capsule all of the lifetimes wherein that contractual limitation was evident.
And you can see that when you're healing someone, you are able to access all of that.
Yes, because the body has a computer. So if you know how to read the language or the computer of the body, you're going to be able to detect that. And it's really important because, the soul is what defines the personality, right? Why is it that we see some of our children, they display a temperament or they have characteristics or virtues, and others are so different? It's because we're already born with all of these programs active in our soul. So when we strive to evolve, when we strive to learn, when we strive to nourish ourselves, we are helping not only ourselves in this lifetime, but in our future lifetimes as well. And here's the other very important matter. When you have a curse of individuation, meaning this is something that you've imposed on yourself because you indulge that negative emotion, for example, the guilt or powerlessness, should you conceive a child, you don't just pass on your physical attributes or virtues, you will pass on the energetic patterns as well. So it's highly likely that you will have passed on as a generational curse, guilt and powerlessness too. And that is mentioned in the Bible, and that will last for 7 generations.
Wow.
So talk about an incentive to nourish and care for your soul. It's a big deal. And
well,
yet,
not only that, especially because you're passing things on. You're basically, or they would say in psycho speak, you're passing on the ancestral pain. And in your case, we would call it karma, but you're passing on, right? You're passing on the ancestral pain to your offspring, to the future.
Yes, they are condemned to experience it just as you have, because if you inherited it. But it's just.
But if you heal it, you end it. And if you heal it, then it heals all the way around.
Everybody talks about ailments of the mind or ailments of the body. Few recognize that something can be an ailment on the level of the soul. And if we're condemned to re-experience these negative patterns over and over again, It's because our soul carried it forward from our past. And the soul then influenced the mind and the personality. And so if we could actually address these burdens of the soul, we are releasing all of that negativity and we are evolving, which is the purpose for each incarnation.
And your soul is so happy, I'm sure.
And prayer is the shortcut.
Sure,
I mean, to
sure,
do
sure.
that without God is like, to me, it's impossible, because you know what? It comes down to, in the end, invoking God's merciful grace.
And this is, you're talking about the energy of the universe and all that is available to us in the form of God. So I know that you heal so much through prayer, and you work with Archangel Gabriel.
I
So
do.
what role does he play when you're healing souls? And you also have a book you use titled Prayers for Your Soul, Your Life and Beyond, with the intercession, there it is, of Archangel Gabriel. So tell us all
Yes.
about that.
So, the soul fascinates me, and matters of the soul. I've just come to focus on this so much because I feel like that's the core issue for every single person. That's where our freedom to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, to attract, the best that love and life have to offer. All of it comes from liberating the soul. So I have observed an epidemic of sorts in my private practice. And as I said, I feel that very little significance has been given to the soul, especially in the younger generations, and we have an epidemic of souls not going to the light for a number of reasons. It could be because, they are in codependent relationships with their loved ones and they're too attached and entangled and they
So
can't
they
go
don't
to the
want to
light.
leave. They can't
Or
leave.
their loved one isn't letting them leave, is imploring them to stay, please stay. It could be because they actually are mummified or surrounded by evil that doesn't allow them to ascend. They've indulged so many negative traits that have come to fruition that have just occupied so much space in their energy body that they cannot ascend.
They're too heavy.
They're too heavy. It could be because they might think that they have sinned or they have committed so many wrongs against others that they're going to go to a very bad place, so they don't want to leave. They don't want to risk leaving. There are just so many. Some of them don't even know that they've died. They may have died in a state of shock. So it's just, there are many, many reasons. In fact, in this book, I think I have a prayer that lists 60, 70 different reasons why souls might not ascend.
Is that what we call a ghost when they don't ascend, that they're just earthbound?
They are
That way?
earthbound souls, yes. So I think that there's a difference between souls that linger sort of in the gray zone and souls that have really been able to penetrate this realm or have never left this realm. And here is the biggest problem. They can attach to somebody who's alive. And when they attach to somebody who's alive, it drives the person crazy. I honestly believe that probably 70% of people in mental institutions have more than one deceased earthbound soul attached to them that has depleted them of energy. I think the first thing you see, I sense, is exhaustion, tremendous exhaustion and fatigue, irritability, impatience, atypical behaviors, mood swings, depression. It's atrocious. They actually can create tremendous, they occupy space. It's not that, and they block energy. And so we know that when energy becomes blocked, we become sick. And it's something that is so overlooked. The people who have it, I have to say, have been to so many doctors, and the doctors will say, well, there's nothing wrong. We don't see anything wrong. And this is the primary issue. And I don't think a week goes by at this point that I am not seeing this problem. And it could just be that, God is sending me all these clients.
Well, people are listening to this now and they know that you can help to heal this. I can imagine if you've got two souls, you've got two conflicting agendas inside of you calling upon you.
Yes.
And I'd be moody too if I had so much going on inside of me and I didn't understand what that was, with differing impulses and different messages.
I want to read you one, for example. This was after we did one session where two earthbound souls were released by this boy. And I was able to muscle test the exact date because it's a computer, right? So like I said, it's a language. If you're able to go in and find that date, you can muscle test. And I said, well, this happened when he was 13 years old, et cetera, et cetera. And she said to me, Seta, she said, my son was in the hospital that day getting a tonsillectomy. So he was vulnerable. He was under anesthesia, right? And of course, where do people perish? Where do they die? They die in hospitals. So if the soul probably got stuck in the hospital, didn't know where to go, and then this young boy was there, and he took advantage of the opportunity, and he enmeshed into this young 13-year-old boy.
Wow. Now, what were the symptoms this boy was showing?
I will tell you, my 20-year-old son, now this is 7 years later. This boy has suffered for 7 years. My 20-year-old son has had chronic stomach issues since he was a young child. We've tried everything to help him, including probiotics, avoiding gluten and dairy, supplements, and probiotics. Nothing worked. His stomach issues were debilitating to the point where he would sometimes miss his classes in college because he couldn't leave the bathroom. After one session with Seta, where she uncovered 2 earthbound spirits attached to him through his umbilicus, his stomach issues have disappeared. She even pinpointed the exact date of when this happened. When I looked back, this was the day he was in the hospital getting his tonsils removed. In addition, his anxiety has significantly decreased, and his overall energy is lighter and brighter. We are so grateful. I mean, who would think?
No, it would be the last thing anyone would come up with.
Right? The last
Western medicine certainly doesn't have any clue about that.
I remember I had another client who was in the hospital for kidney surgery, and she was the director of her department. She said, Seta, I could not even formulate a sentence. I couldn't think anymore. I couldn't direct anybody. I went on disability. I saw her 2 years later, again, one session. We removed the deceased earthbound soul. 1 week later, she was back at work. She said, I have all my mental faculties back. Now, I have to say that probably if you could even understand, and I just want to give a few more examples because I think that people can't even they can't quite believe that this kind of thing can happen.
I mean, I'm hearing this from you, and I've heard this from you before, but a lot of people are hearing this for the very first time. Yes. Oh my God, I could have 2 souls, or someone I know who's troubled could have more than one soul in them. Whoa, my goodness.
So it depends, right? So in this case, this boy, the 2 souls attached to him were complete strangers, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's your own loved one that you're not letting leave or won't leave you or both. And I will say that the person usually at that point is really in a state of grief. They will feel a tremendous heaviness on their chest. And grief, depression, weeping are just common depletion of energy, fatigue. They can't move on. They're constantly thinking about their loved one. They can't let go. They can't process. People are saying, it's been so long already. I can't believe you haven't adjusted to this yet. And it's because the soul is literally sitting on them. I had a woman whose husband was present. She hated crime shows. She never watched the news. She never read the newspaper. Right after he died, she said, all I did was everything he wanted to do. I found myself watching every show that he would watch, doing everything that he would do. And guess what? The minute he left, she completely stopped. I mean, he was really impacting her daily activities. I had another one. She said, my parents died. I sort of adjusted well, but my brother, I can't let him go. I think about him all the time. She said he loved Porsches. She said, I even bought a Porsche for him. Can you imagine? And
wow.
Then the minute the soul was gone, she said, I hate that damn Porsche. I can't wait to sell it. But I think probably the scariest thing that I had heard, to be honest with you, and this does happen, was I had a session with a mother who was calling on behalf of her daughter, who was in a program for a behavioral program down in North Carolina. And it was an all-girls program. She had been very active sexually with boys prior to this therapeutic boarding school.
Like an intervention. Yeah.
Yes, intervention, exactly. And her mother went to visit her 3 months later, and she said to her Mom, I just want you to know that I'm trans. I'm binding my breasts. She said, I'm going to have them removed. And she said, and I'm a lesbian. And her mother was really shocked. She said, how could this be? I mean, I've only known you to be boy crazy, literally. And she said, no, I'm a completely different person. And so, the mother just was silent and just sort of took it in. But we happened to have an appointment that day. And
just coincidentally.
This is how God works. And she told me, and she described, I said, well, let me scan her. Let me see what's going on. Well, I have to say that I saw a man, and if I'm going to describe him, it was lascivious. I mean, I can't even tell you how many demons of lust and perversion he had on him. He was completely embedded in her and had taken over to the point where he impacted her sexuality. Well, now listen to this. It's the next day.
The mother removed him.
Yes. After several hours. Let me tell you, it was a challenge.
And you were praying the whole time to get him out of there.
Through prayer, of course. And she said, I'm going to take you to the mall because I know you need some undergarments, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, she doesn't have a telephone while she's in this therapeutic, inter school or what is that called? Anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so she was utilizing her mother's phone to call her girlfriend in New Jersey. And she said, guess what? Oh my God. She said, this place has so many cute guys. This guy is checking me out. She said, oh, he's so cute. I'm going to have to come back and, see if I can talk to him again. And then she said, wait, what am I saying? She said, I'm supposed to be trans. She said, how is this possible? She said, oh, I guess I switched back. And that was, that's crazy.
That's dramatic. That's dramatic.
The dramatic. And the mother was just smiling because she knew what it was. But how many mothers really would even think that might possibly be the contributory factor to such a drastic decision? And it's not the first one that I've seen where sexuality is definitely impacted, and even not just in preference of gender, but overall activity and behavior. So we have to just really understand that if we've undergone a sudden change, a dramatic change, or if we're really battling something inside of us that's very atypical, that perhaps it must be within our vocabulary to assess, could it possibly be a deceased soul, an earthbound soul that is attached to me? That's the question. It
doesn't hurt to go to someone like you and find out for sure. If they're not, go to do whatever else you need to do. But if they are, it could be a one-stop.
And you might be surprised to see where they show up, obviously in hospitals and funeral homes and cemeteries, but they really love the ocean too. So I would strongly recommend a prayer of protection. And it comes now, I'm going to come back to why Archangel Gabriel. So I have a dear friend who has a beautiful business, Bulgard, of selling wallets and handbags and on Amazon. And she said, I'm really interested in creating a religious statue. And I said, well, if you're going to do something like that, I said, could you possibly, create Archangel Gabriel? And here's a picture of the statue. And
bring it up closer to the camera so everybody can see it, Seta. Yeah, that's it. There he is. Oh, a little bit. Perfect. Yeah.
And it's under the brand Divinely Blessed and also available. And I said, I really want to get some prayers out, because I said, people need resources. If they even feel this heaviness or this grief, they don't necessarily know how to release it. They don't know how to send an earthbound soul to the light. And of course, Archangel Gabriel not only delivers new souls that are going to be born to Archangel Gabriel not only delivers souls to expectant parents, but also upon death, Archangel Gabriel is one of the archangels that will help escort the soul to the light and to help that soul receive the blessings of last rites or the holy sacraments, absolution, forgiveness, redemption, all of the things that...
And it doesn't matter what religion you are, however it is.
Every religion, every culture has traditionally had a ritual or a spiritual practice that addresses the passing of the soul and helping that soul facilitate their transition from earth, or whatever word you want to say, denoting the final sanctuary or resting place. And I will tell you that in America, when we have so many people are celebrating, upon the death of a loved one, they have a celebration of life ceremony or they have a memorial service. It does not take the place of a funeral, because in a funeral, I see that the person is completely surrounded by their loved ones, completely is bathed continuously the entire time in light. So they're being washed, they're being prepared. There is a process that is taking place. I happen to be Armenian in the Armenian church. I see that they receive Holy Chrism. I see there are so many steps that have to take place in order to prepare them. And in fact, 40 days after death, we have another special service just to ensure that that soul goes to the light.
All right, so wait a minute. What if a person is killed in a war or something and there's no funeral? What happens to that soul?
It's a problem. It's really a problem. I think that sometimes they go to the light, but sometimes these are I count these amongst some of those ghosts that are not able to ascend because they don't have anybody to pray for them and to help the soul transition beyond death.
Now, if you have somebody who dies like that, but people get together and they know this happened to the soul, even though they don't have the body or whatever, can they
Yes,
pray and help
absolutely.
that soul go to the light,
Absolutely.
even if it's a disastrous thing that's happened to that person? I have actually spoken to people who have been in areas like visited like a concentration camp, and they said there were many souls there, and they prayed and they helped them to go to the light, that they were
Yes.
still around all those
I did,
years
I did the
later.
same from the Armenian genocide. In 2012, I went to a church that was going to be celebrating divine liturgy for the first time in 100 years. And when I went specifically to help the souls go to the light. And even with all of the turmoil around this world, it's one of my constant prayers that God sends the angels and the divine beings of love and light to help the soul's transition and to lead them home, because it's not an automatic thing. I know everybody just assumes that it happens automatically, but it's not. And all you have to do is look at our cultures. I mean, in the Jewish religion, how many days do you sit Shiva in order to
Often
prepare the
7 days, minimum 3 to 7.
right?
Often,
So
yes.
this is not a coincidence. These things exist because there's a need. You know, the same way in the Armenian church, 40 days afterwards, we're praying again for the soul. I heard that the Indians pray for 12 consecutive days. I have a friend from Slovakia. She said they pray for 3 days consecutively. There is an entire process, a ritual that has to take place. And guess what? I mean, nothing is happening. In America, it is an epidemic because the souls are not going to the light. They are not receiving the nourishment, the nurturance that they need. And for whatever reason, perhaps they did not nurture their own souls towards their own evolution. Maybe they didn't pray. Maybe they didn't know, they were ignorant. You know, these things have to be taught. So somehow, you know, there is such a disenchantment with religious institutions these days, but maybe we've thrown the baby out with the bathwater too, you know, and it's just.
Right. I hear you. In that prayer book that you have with Archangel Gabriel,
Yes,
do you
yes,
have prayers that can help someone send their soul to the
yes,
light?
I do. I do have a whole entire section devoted for that. And for the bereaved, as well as sending souls to the light and general prayers of protection. I just wanted people to have the resources and tools at hand. And Archangel Gabriel is such a support. He's just so amazing and can really help alleviate these burdens. So we have to learn how to ask for help, you know?
Right. So I just want to ask you, and then I want to move on to talking to you about this multiple soul syndrome that you talk about.
Yes.
What kinds, if someone is dealing with someone in their life, what kind of ailments would you kind of suspect to see in people who have a deceased soul attached to them? And are there certain common symptoms that would identify that there's this particular problem? Is it
Well,
mostly, I mean, you say you find a lot of them in mental hospitals, but how about walking the streets in your daily activities?
definitely exhaustion, fatigue, mental dullness, mood swings, anger, irritability, impatience.
Oh, wow.
It's just, they don't even understand. It's like an uncomfortable feeling in their own body, complete lack of peace, complete lack of peace. And let's not forget that if a person cannot go to the light, if they are surrounded by evil, then they contaminate the living soul with that same evil. And then the frequency of the living soul deteriorates, and eventually they feel, you know, sickly in some manner. So whether it's on the mental plane, the physical, emotional, or all of the above.
Okay, so I'm going somewhere new and I want to make sure my soul is going to remain unattached to nothing,
Yes.
nothing untoward is going to come at me. What can I do to prevent an attachment from happening? Aside from run to you and like get prayed over, but what else can I do?
Well, you can definitely pray for protection in advance.
Oh, and there are
Um,
prayers of protection too. I know in your
yes,
booklet. Yes.
multiple prayers of protection. Actually, it's about having a sound energetic structure. I do have a series of webinars coming forward that, Spirit told me, and it's entitled, Healthy Boundaries, Healthy Relationships, and Healthy Life. So if we have stronger boundaries, a deceased soul is going to be less likely to attach to us.
So how do you create that boundary with prayer?
Yes, I ask Spirit to do it. I'm not going to be able to do it, right? The person can't do it themselves. This is when really you have to believe, you have to have faith, and you have to ask. And then you can say thank you as well. Like, for example, I just had a friend who had a surgery, and I know that hospitals are areas of concern. And so I asked for the angels to line her hospital room and the entryway, and to escort her, to be with her everywhere she went in that hospital, and to keep her safe. So I know that I asked, and then I rest knowing that it has been granted, because I have the faith that I'm heard. In fact, I know that I'm heard.
That's so interesting. And it's sort of it's like it's sort of like giving a person a preventative, you're helping them prevent
Yes,
something negative from happening to them.
yes.
Almost
And,
like a prophylactic, really, in a way.
you know, just to give another example, I had a client who came and he was complaining about his son. He said, "My son has not laughed. He has not smiled in 2 years.
Oh my.
He's in a deep depression." He said,
Oh my.
what do you think this is?" And it was a woman in her 50s who had died and was attached to him, giving him very unusual thoughts, completely taking over. And his wife, even before we were done, completely done, his wife texted him. She said, "You won't believe it." She said, "But he's smiling, he's laughing, and he's playing with the dog." I mean, it was such
Wow.
a big deal that even while he was still here, that his mother, this young boy's mother, was actually texting the father. I mean, that's so sad, right? That's really sad.
Right.
So we have to be aware. It's all about creating awareness. And that's why I'm so grateful that, that I have this opportunity to express this ailment of the soul that really can take over one's life.
It's amazing. And nobody really talks about. I mean, I've spoken to a few people who are aware of this, but it's not commonly known. And there's another thing I'd like you to explain to people, because you talk about timelines and you often create an enhanced so people are not aware that there's any such thing as a timeline in our
Okay.
lives as souls. And you say that you can, and I've had this happen with you, that to create an enhanced superlative timeline, and the inferior life path is eliminated. Please start from the beginning and explain this to everyone, please.
So we're all living on a trajectory, right? And it's a timeline, it's a life path that has certain characteristics that are likely to transpire, because that's the path that we're on.
We
Now,
set that up. We set that up before we incarnate, correct?
well, it's constantly fluid, actually, because it depends on your thoughts, and there will be a timeline that will take precedence above all. But imagine, for example, that you have a deceased soul that latches onto you. Now, your timeline just completely went sideways, because you are no longer the sum total of the energy emanating from you. Somebody else is also interfering in your timeline, making you moody, making you irritable, becoming angry with people, fighting with people, becoming depressed, grief-stricken. There are so many different words, to be honest with you, but the trajectory of your life is no longer the same as it once was. So part of my job is to understand, are there timelines that are interfering with you? For example, if somebody has an evil eye on you, or is very upset with you, and directs a lot of negative energy to you, if your boundaries are not strong, that negative energy will penetrate And it will also impact your timeline, because now you're going to abide by that negativity. You're going to adhere to this new mandate of somebody else's evil eye imposed upon you.
Now, how does someone know if their boundaries are strong, or how do they strengthen those boundaries?
Again, I really believe it's through prayer.
Prayer.
It's prayer and purification. You have to pray to be purified of that which has contaminated you, or the negative energy that's currently present. And then you have to ask for your shields. We have 3 levels of shields. We have boundaries for everything to be rectified, repaired, regenerated, and recreated. And I say to God's specifications, because I don't know what's perfect, but God knows what's perfect for us.
To our highest good. It's whatever's to our highest good.
Yes. And the other focus that I just want, because I wanted to talk very briefly about multiple soul syndrome, because it also has everything to do with a soul perishing and not going to the light. So if for whatever reason, somebody has during a failed pregnancy, a pregnancy that does not come to fruition, we're gonna erase this too. I'm gonna say this again. Sorry.
That's all right.
Whoever's editing, I'm going to say this. I'm going to try. There are times when a person will be pregnant, and for whatever reason, the pregnancy will not culminate in a live birth. That soul must also be prayed for. That soul must also be released and taken to the light. If a mother has worry, for example, about her miscarriage, and she surrounds that soul with the negativity of worry, or perhaps she's had an abortion and now she feels guilty, or perhaps she has had multiple IVFs that have failed and she has a fear that it's going to fail, that it's not going to culminate in a live birth. Whatever the negative emotion is, if it surrounds the soul, it is highly likely that it will prevent the soul from ascending. Now, should the mother become pregnant again, that soul wanting to leave the maternal womb, stuck within the maternal womb, will find a way to embed within the newly developing fetus.
Oh my.
The newly developing fetus will experience this more often than not, unless it's a failed twin, as a violation. It will cause tremendous anxiety. And there is a battle for control over the subconscious and conscious mind. And this is something that I see often in people diagnosed with bipolar disorder, in people who are confused about their gender, in people who have tremendous mood swings as well. In fact, they can't make a decision regarding their career or a partner. There are many, many complications. I do go in detail on my website at wwehealings.com for a description of many of the ailments that will prevail. But just to give you an example, I'll never forget, it was right after I had discovered this to be true, that a mother came to see me and she said, "You won't believe it." She said, "I went to see a psychic, and that psychic told me that my daughter has 2 souls." And she said this literally, she had gone to the psychic literally the same day that I was told about this matter. And it was
again, no accidents.
It was what confirmation, right? And her daughter was anorexic. She had been hospitalized for trying to kill herself, for anorexia, she was in rehabs for many, many years. She was very depressed. She had told her mother the prior year that she was gay, and her mother really didn't believe it, because she said, it just doesn't seem like it's my daughter. She had very, very short hair. She was a very beautiful young lady. And I said, well, I feel that she has a male inside of her. And she had been a product of IVF. There were 5 embryos placed in the mother simultaneously, and she was the only living child that was born of that gestation. I will say that as he left, the soul left, he said, "I didn't let her eat." He said, "Because I didn't want her to have breasts. I wanted her to be as flat as possible." That's what he said. And he said he was very happy to leave, because he thought that he was going to be trapped inside of her. And he felt that the only way to escape from being trapped within her was through death, which is why he had wanted her to commit suicide. So now, 2 months after the mother joyfully recounted that her daughter had gained 25 pounds.
Wow.
She was happy. She wasn't suicidal. She was no longer anorexic. And she actually had a boyfriend. It was
A miracle.
yeah. So what happened was that there was a very dominant soul of the opposite gender that had imposed his will upon her, but at the same time wanted her to die so he could escape. So this is one brief example. It's been 6 years now that I have been working with hundreds of cases of multiple soul syndrome, and it is life altering. It is absolutely life altering.
Now, if
So
there's another soul in someone, can that soul, that man, that soul that didn't belong there, he couldn't opt just to leave on his own? I mean, he opted to enter on his own.
yes, but once he entered into her, the soul becomes enmeshed in the flesh of the developing
Oh,
fetus. It's like a Siamese twin surgery. It takes hours and hours. It's very delicate. And if you think two souls are difficult, you can imagine what 3 or 4 souls
oh
are.
my gosh. Is that
Yes.
what makes someone schizophrenic sometimes? Or
Yes. And definitely borderline personality disorder is
wow.
more than 3 souls, generally speaking, from my experience, right? So this is what I'm talking about when we're talking about ailments of the soul. So imagine if we learned how to honor the souls of the deceased, even if it's a brief time intrauterine, we can avoid so many of these problems. And that's really the message that I want to convey.
That's a
So
beautiful message.
that's it. Just pray for the souls. And you know what? You would be doing such a favor for all of humanity if you could pray for the souls that exist outside who don't have family members praying for them, that may have been stuck or earthbound for hundreds of years. Because guess what? I think it's true, although we can't be 100% certain. I am told that if a soul is in purgatory, they cannot pray for themselves.
Purgatory, but people have different ideas about purgatory.
To
Some
me,
people think it's just a plane of existence, that it's not a punishment. They're just sort of in
yes, it's a
limbo.
lost, to me, it's a lost soul. It's limbo, purgatory, limbo. It's a gray zone, whatever you want to call it. But it's a person, it's a soul, I should say, that cannot ascend and cross over to the light. That I can definitively say. They say that once a soul, and I muscle tested this, I asked, and I was told many times, and I asked multiple other people, because it seems so sad to me that a person can't pray for themselves once they are no longer incarnated within a physical vessel, but it appears to be true. So I just pray that we understand how important it is to pray for our souls, to pray for our loved ones, to incorporate God in our daily lives, to have a relationship with God so that we can actually create greater ease in our lives and overcome these obstacles with light pouring down upon us as we're in alignment with Source. And it doesn't have to be as difficult as you think it does. And please refrain from complaining so that the universe doesn't send you more to complain about.
Or if you
So,
hear someone who's complaining, you can feel sorry for that person because they're not doing their soul any favors,
oh
nor
no.
the souls around them.
And here is something that I'm going to say too. You know, a lot of times people feel like as a friend, you should listen to your close friend complain. You know, you should allow them to air their grievances to so that they can feel heard. But this is a very delicate matter, because the more you give into that, the more they're going to bury themselves with that negativity. So you can say very briefly, I'm going to allow you to say something, or 1 or 2 things, but I love you too much to let you complain ad nauseum, because you're only going to attract more to complain about. So
that would point to the uselessness of creating so much drama in your life, wouldn't it? Which a lot of people like to do so that they can complain.
So I should also say that, you know, I wanted to offer people an opportunity to partake in a webinar where I'm going to be talking about invoking God's grace to help souls cross over to the light, so that they would, if the person feels ill-equipped to handle it themselves, and I'm sure that many people are, of course, you can always go to your religious institution or to a spiritual leader or to a healer to receive assistance as well. But if you have an awareness now after today's podcast that maybe this might be an ailment of the soul that you are contending with, then perhaps this will be helpful.
Too. I want to ask you two other things also. You were talking about Archangel Gabriel. Could
Yes.
you just explain to people who is Archangel Gabriel? Because I know he's represented in different religious cultures. And you also, we still haven't talked about the 7 steps to abundance, and we cannot conclude this interview
Okay.
without telling everyone, with Archangel Gabriel's help, what are those 7 steps to abundance, please?
Okay. So Archangel Gabriel is known in all of the 3 major religions. He explained Daniel's visions and messages of those visions to Daniel the prophet in the Old Testament. He also announced to Mother Mary the coming of Christ. He also went to Muhammad, and he is venerated as the angel of revelation and has given several chapters, the Quran. So he is recognized by all of the major religions. And for me, I feel that he has the book of life in his hand. He's supposed to be the one who has a trumpet. And I don't know if you can see here in the statue, but we have a trumpet because
yes,
he's supposed to be the one who
he's
announces
holding it in his left hand.
On Judgment Day, if the soul's name was written in the book of life. So Archangel Gabriel is a tremendous force, and
he's quite a communicator. He's quite a messenger, I would say.
Yes, he is a messenger, and of visions, explains visions, helps with our intuition. He just helps so much with the soul in general, and with fertility, actually, for parents who need help in that area as well. There are so many things, and you can read up on Archangel Gabriel, but he was the one that I wanted to start with specifically because I knew that he was, the title is Prayers for Your Soul, Your Life, and Beyond, because it's really that beyond that is of such primemost importance to us all. If only we knew that, if only we understood that the real report card comes afterwards.
Right.
Okay?
The life review when you cross over.
Yes, of course.
Okay. So before we get to that life
the 7
review.
steps of abundance.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So that's actively the book that I'm working on right now, actually. There is a process to abundance. The first is gratitude. Imagine you're a mother and your son said to you, Matthew said to you, I love the dinner that you prepared, Mom. What's the first thing that you do? You make a mental note of it. And you say, in the future, I'm going to prepare this again because he was grateful. So there's no difference. God is the parent of your soul. And so when you say thank you to God, God says, oh, look, Seta said, thank you. I'm going to give her more of the same. I'm going to develop this path of communication. And the more grateful you are, the more you can receive. Now, the second step is to understand what is your intention. If you have to monitor your thoughts, because your thoughts, your words, your deeds all become the intentions that reflect from you, that the universe reflects directly back to you based on the law of attraction. And if you are careful in thinking good thoughts, then you're going to manifest abundance far more easily than if you complain about all the struggles you are enduring in life. Okay, so intention is the second thing. The third is surrender. You're not in control. You're just really not in control. If you want to be in control, what I find is generally the person is going to feel very powerless, because the more control you want, the less likely it is that it will come about. And if you have unrealistic expectations of what you can or cannot control, this differential of what you can't control leads you to feeling powerless. So the more you can surrender and say, you know what, thy will be done, and just let go and let God orchestrate everything. I mean, when we pray, this is the beauty of it. It's, we're saying to God, we are open to receiving. And I know that you can see the big picture far more than I can. And you can take away all of the little obstacles in my path, things that I don't even know are there. And so when we surrender, we are entrusting God. And isn't it the same thing? What does a little child do? A child entrusts their parents that they're going to have food on the table, that they're going to have a warm bed, that they're going to have a home to live, a roof over their heads. We're entrusting and surrendering to our parents And yes, our parents are able to take care of us for the most part, right? In general, in the world that we live in.
You pray, please.
Yes.
Right? That they
Then,
can.
then we have, after surrendering, we have being receptive, really being open to receiving. Then the next step is to retain. A lot of times you receive something, it's fleeting. You can't utilize it. It's just, you can't hold on to it, but you have to be able to retain something, to then create something, to utilize it, and then to make manifest something from all of the resources that God has given you. And then when your dreams have come to fruition, you must sit and you must enjoy it. The seventh step of abundance is to enjoy. It's the pause that allows you to feel replete and satiated with all of the abundant gifts and blessings you've received.
It's an emotional and an energetic enjoyment. It's not like about going out and buying the next Porsche or something, right?
It's you know, it's whatever the person wants, actually,
ah,
right? It's what their definition of abundance is. But yes, in my unlike that deceased soul who
that's
was
what I was thinking about.
about his sister purchasing a Porsche. Yes, this is about enjoying something, and then we come right back to the beginning of the cycle, which is gratitude. So when we're enjoying something, it should right there and then lead us to declare gratitude. And these are the 7 steps of abundance as dictated to me by source.
It's beautiful. And Seta, you were talking about an upcoming event you're having. Are there other ways, other things going on you want to tell everyone about? And do you have I think you're offering a really lovely free gift to the members of our Grief and Rebirth podcast audience, which you and I recorded together.
Yes,
So you want to
yes.
tell everyone about that and tell everyone a little more about how they can get a hold of you or what you're doing. Your ehealings.com, all of that you're
Yes.
involved with?
Yes. My email is seta@ehealings.com, and my website is ehealings.com. And I have actually a library of webinars that I've pre-recorded and addressing so many of the issues that I commonly observe, and including unburdening the soul and structural deficits and so many different things. In the future, I probably have around 12 webinars in the next 12 months. And I hope to.
So if people sign on, they will get notified about the webinar and they can become a part of that, right?
Yes, they can. They can. And just to be brief, in the Healthy Boundaries and Healthy Relationships, Healthy Life series, it's a series of 5. We have to understand that when we are overly concerned about our loved ones, like, for example, our children, that we can impose our negativity upon them and actually alter their timeline. So if we're constantly worried about our children, fearful for their well-being, their health, or their future, we are actually harming them, because fear is a negative emotion. So if you're constantly directing negative energy towards a loved one, especially if it's a parent, that child cannot avoid that negativity, because we have heart cords.
You're saying that child takes in the negativity inside of them,
yes,
as opposed to being positive and saying to the child, I know you're going to be fine. I love you. Right? Yes. Like casting it in a positive light.
Yes. So what happens is that we impose these negative patterns on the child, and the child actually suffers as a consequence. And so one of the webinars is about addressing the removal of the negativity from others that we've imposed. One of them has to do with removing the negative energy that others have imposed upon us. And probably the most difficult thing is taking on the karma of other people. When you worry for somebody and you are not detached, you can actually take on their problems. And this is a tremendous burden, because it will alter your lifetime. It will alter your timeline and your entire life path, and you won't even understand what hit you.
And it's sort of like a codependent thing, right? Is it?
Well, that is separate, but it can be related. I can just tell you that if you absorb like a lot of therapists, I have a lot of clients who are psychologists and people in the health related services, and they worry about their clients or their patients. And if they worry too much, if they want to help so much that they're no longer detached, they will actually take on the negativity from the client. And that will be so burdensome for them. One of them, we were going to be working on structure and shielding so that if we can incorporate stronger boundaries, we'll be less likely to take negativity on. And then we will also be addressing codependency. And codependency, by the way, is 100% a derivative of a structural deficit, wherein the person is literally embedded and entangled in the other person, and there has to be an energetic separation that takes place.
Or what will happen? What will happen? I know quite a few people who are very codependently entwined. So what if they can't heal that in this lifetime? What is the consequence of that when they cross over or whatever, or
when
can't
they
cross over?
they will not be able to cross over. It's one of the primary reasons why people cannot cross over.
Really?
And yes, because there are too many cords attaching them to the living, and in the end, they just siphon that energy and they cause tremendous heaviness. It's really it's very sad. It's very, very sad. But it can be addressed. It really can be addressed because it's a structural deficit. If a person has a strong structure, they can be rooted and grounded, anchored in their own energy body. It's when their structure shatters and they have these identity strands that normally are embedded in the center above and center below, which are just aspects of your energetic structure. If there is no structure, the identity strands have to find a home, and they'll find somebody else, and they will embed through one of the chakras to somebody that they feel very close with, and they will go into their center above and center below, and they will be continuously siphoning energy from that person. And the reason why this person that they are attached to becomes abusive is because they feel like suffocated. They feel that you are, taking blood from stone. So they become abusive to push you away. But meanwhile, there is no way because you feel that you need that person to survive. It's not about love. It's about survival.
Wow.
So what we do in this webinar is we recreate the structure and then pull our cords and identity strands out of the other person and then embed in our newly reconstructed structure. And it's really life-altering as well.
And you can do this just by being part of a group and coming on to one of your events. Yes. You don't need a private to do this or anything like that.
Because it's in the library, even if it doesn't completely be, even if it's not completely addressed the first time, they have access to listen to it over and over again, and it remains in their lifetime in their library for as long as
That's wonderful. That's great. And Seta, you want to tell everyone about our the prayers that you recorded in the Live Your Most Evolved Life Summit that they will get for free from this your graciousness. And we will send links to everything with this podcast.
It had to do with timelines, because I know that when people are entrenched in a state of grief, they're really living in the past. They can't move on. And they're living on an expired timeline. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a hamster ring. So what I wanted to do was afford the person the opportunity to leave that timeline and live in the present. Because change and transformation can only take place in the present. And the bottom line is that, we don't perish with the deceased. We have a life on earth. And God allowed us the grace of life because we're supposed to evolve. We're supposed to live life in the present, which is a present in and of itself.
That's so true.
I pray that that it will be beneficial for those people, especially those people who want to alter their timelines, and not only the grief-stricken, but people who are living on perhaps an inferior timeline or an alien timeline that has been, intrusively embedded into them, and so forth. So,
that's good to know. And what is the Seta Araz Shahinian personal tip for finding joy in life?
This is what I asked Spirit yesterday, and I said, what do you want me to say? And I think that it's about service. I think that when we know that we can help somebody, that we can make an impact on somebody else's life, we can create an ease or alleviate a problem for them as an instrument in service to God, then that is going to really create a great deal of joy within us, knowing that our existence made a difference and that our actions made a difference for the betterment of somebody else's life.
I think you just described what you and I are both doing in our lives, and it's beautiful. And I do feel tremendous joy. I also feel joy at having you here, Seta. And I want to thank you from my heart for helping so many people to heal their minds, bodies, and souls. You educate them and you aid them to prevent dis-ease mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually, which means that you help to end needless suffering. And I also want to thank you from my heart for this healing, insights filled, and truly divine interview on Grief and Rebirth podcast, for which you've played such a huge part. Thank you so, so much. And here's a loving reminder, everyone, that you can see the show notes and all Grief and Rebirth podcast episodes on ireneweinberg.com. And make sure to follow us and like us on social at Irene S. Weinberg on Instagram, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. As I like to say, to be continued. Thank you so much, and much love to you, Seta.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you. Many blessings, everyone. To be continued, and bye for now.
Goodbye.